Hydrogen bomb testing awakens an ancient monster who terrorizes Japan. Special guest Clinton Festa joins us to chat about getting a blood sample from a prehistoric beast, a carbon dating debate, and a good gig for Steve Martin. Then we find out if 1954's Godzilla and 1956's Godzilla King of the Monsters stand the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special test of time. I'm here with Al and Noah. How you doing, Al?
I am doing very well, and you and I are both joined by our good friend coming back on the show, special guest Clinton Festa. Clinton, welcome back.
Thank you, and great to see you guys again. I always have a ton of fun doing this. It's awesome to be back.
I am so glad that you're here. I'm very excited to talk about Godzilla and Godzilla, King of the Monsters, ! But before we do that, we have a little tradition whenever you're on the show, Clint, where we talk about the other things that you're working on outside of your life and your job and your podcast special appearances. You create unbelievably amazing stuff. So first, I want to talk about History in the Making, which is the new podcast that's on Stories Found.
That's actually a quickie. That's a 2-minute play. So they do something called Minute Mondays, which is roughly 1 or 2 minutes. I've worked with them in the past. They're fantastic. They're so cool. Ava Love Hannah is the person behind that, with her husband Paul, who does the sound, and they both act and everything. So History in the Making is a 2, maybe 1.5 minute play about the downfall of the Roman Empire. We get in, we get out, but it's a comedy, obviously.
So what year are you talking about, approximately?
There's 2 characters, and one is kind of a fictional Roman emperor, Maximus, and then the barbarian chieftain is Davidicus the Destroyer. Not historical features, Davidicus the Destroyer, please call me Dave. They're the 2 characters, and they go over, the aftermath and who's going to have to write the history book, and whether or not it's even worth conquering another empire if it means that the history books are written by the winners, because then you have to do a report on it when you're done, basically.
It's very, very, very funny. I felt like the jokes about the in-text citations were written right for me, because that's just right up my alley. And while you're saying nice things about Stories Found, they also said very nice things about you, and that your previous episodes were some of their highest downloaded.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I had Picky Zombies, where zombies are getting an infection at at a culinary institute, and all the snooty zombies that ate the infected foie gras, they don't want to eat just any brain, so that's Picky Zombies. And then the other one is The Experience, about a restaurant where every meal you order is associated with a mood. Kind of the question there is, what are we going for as consumers? Are we going for happiness? Really? Not all the time, I don't think. Sometimes we're actually out to buy sadness, or we intentionally want to be angry or something like that. So, but that's still a very silly comedy.
They're silly, but they're also smart. And I do think that you are able to do both things at once, which isn't easy. So I have to commend you for doing that. I believe I've linked to the previous Stories Found episodes before. I'll definitely link to History in the Making. But I also want to talk about your new play in North Carolina, The Nuns of Camelot. I'm a little bummed about that one because I live in New York and can't see that one. I can listen to the Stories Found podcast, but tell us a little bit about The Nuns of Camelot.
That's currently the longest play I've written that has gotten a full stage production. So I've written full-length plays that have gotten stage readings, and eventually I'm working towards that goal. But it's hard to make time in the schedule to really commit to a full-length play because it's just so much editing.
Sure.
I saw it on Saturday, just a couple of days ago, And it was so much fun and I loved it. And I would just give so much credit to the directors and the actors. There's 5 characters, 2 of them are nuns. They're in Camelot. They wonder, what are we doing here? Arthur has peace, established in Camelot. All the orphans there are no orphans. All the poor people, the hungry people are fed. There's no real problems. What are we doing? So they have that sort of existential crisis. And then in comes Guinevere, who says, I need your help. I need somewhere to lay low. Well, news blows over of the affair that I'm having with Lancelot. And they say, okay, sure, you can stay here. And she says, great, thanks. Hey, Lancelot, she said, you can come in now. Do you mind pushing 2 beds together? And, so basically she plans on continuing their affair. And then Arthur steps in and, the nuns have to deal with the absurd expectations of Guinevere, Arthur, and Lancelot. So like I said, I saw it over the weekend. I was really happy I got the chance to see it. And I loved how the cast was having fun with it and everything like that. I'll get another chance next Sunday.
Fantastic.
That's got to be really, really exciting watching these actors bring your play to life. You wrote it on the page and now here it is with people saying the lines and a proper set on stage. That's got to feel amazing.
Honestly, it does. I'm very fortunate that we have a really good scene here in North Carolina for this sort of thing. You write a script, and if you're happy with it, there's got to be a quality control process, meaning don't submit something if you're not sure about it. Go back and fix it.
Sure.
There's a saying like you don't want to be a comedy pioneer, which means you don't want to be an early settler. So don't take that first draft and just deal with it. And it's kind of one of the reasons I actually have a hard time writing new stuff is because I'd rather write something that I am sure of, because if you're not, then you can imagine yourself there opening night, sitting in the crowd and hearing crickets. But that's not what happened. And the best part is being in the audience, hearing everybody laugh at all the right moments, seeing the cast have so much fun with it, and knowing and hearing from them how much fun they had in rehearsals. There's your reason right there. That's what I enjoy most about it.
Amazing. That is so, so cool.
Thank you.
I really hope I can see one of your plays in person someday. That would just be amazing. Did you get flowers?
No, I don't.
No.
This is a 1-act play festival, so they kind of roll right into the next play. The cast does stay on stage for 30 minutes, and it's 3 scenes. So they do have their bow at the end, and then we go right into the next play, and that cast does their thing, and they get their moment and their bow. No, nobody's ever given me flowers. Al, you could be the first.
I plan on it for sure.
Well, if a certain thing pans out, there will be something possibly going on in New York City, but I'll keep you updated.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
It wouldn't be live. I'll just have to come back on the show and update you guys on that for another episode. Because right now, I can't say much about it, but it's something that has happened and was filmed, and there's hopefully going to be they're doing it. I just don't have details yet, so I can't really share it.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to hearing more. You have piqued my curiosity. But let's get into Godzilla. So after your last time here, we were talking about what the next movie might be, and you mentioned the 1954 Godzilla and the 1956 American version of that movie. Why did you want to talk about these 2 movies, Clint?
Well, you could talk about the original on its own. If you talk about the American version, it's impossible not to talk about the original. So they're 2 years apart. These are the first 2 Godzilla movies. So what happened was I'm in my public library and I get this. And if you can't see, I'm holding up the DVD. I said, you know what? I've never seen the original Godzilla movie. I've usually not been disappointed with originals of like franchises. When it comes to like RoboCop, for example, you think, oh, well, it's just going to be a bunch of tons of bullets and people getting shot up. But you realize it's about something. Like it really is about something. Same thing with like Rambo. This is about the displacement of, somebody who served their country and now there's no place for him. Compare that to some of the later sequels in the whatever franchise, and you're like, all right, it kind of becomes about the action and the flash and the box office money and stuff like that.
Sure.
So let me check out the original. So I borrow this from the library and I open it up, and I find out there's 2 DVDs in there. And one of them is Godzilla King of Monsters! ! I'm so glad you pointed that out at the beginning. I'm like, all right. So I didn't know what that meant. And then I watched the first one, and then I watched the second one, and I'm like, oh boy, what'd we do here? So I thought I appreciate you guys watching 2 movies for this episode and being, being up for talking about two, but I look at it as like 1.5 movies.
That's fair.
I'd never seen this, and I figured that this was going to be the original Japanese one, and then the second one, oh, King of the Monsters. This is going to be the one with Mothra and the other ones, because monsters, he's the king of them.
Right.
And the second film, I turned it on, and first I checked, did I put on the right film?
Yep.
And I don't always do this, but I had to look up, like, what the hell is going on here? And I had no idea it was totally a kind of a recut of the first film, just for American audiences.
And I thought the same thing. I thought we were going to get Mothra and, the other ones. I thought it was going to be, a sequel. What are we going to do? Bring in new characters. You can't just knock over Tokyo again. But it was not King of Monsters. It's still just Godzilla. So I was a little surprised too. And basically everything you described, that's exactly what I kind of went through the first time I borrowed this from the library.
Al, did you know going into the second film that it was a remake in a number of ways of the first?
No, I guess in my head, I thought that it was an American remake of the Japanese version. And so when it started exactly the same, I was confused at first. And then I quickly got, oh, this isn't even a remake. This is an Americanized version of it. But I do feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit with the 1956 version, because I do want to take a little time and talk about the 1954 version on its own. Then we'll follow it up with what they did 2 years later. But James, why don't you give our listeners a recap of the original Godzilla from 1954?
All right, so the original film takes place in post-World War II Japan. After several ships are mysteriously destroyed, scientists discover that nuclear testing has awakened a giant prehistoric monster, Godzilla. The monster attacks Oto Island, then leaves Tokyo in flames with its unstoppable size and radioactive breath. Dr. Yamane, a paleontologist, believes Godzilla should be studied. That puts him at odds with other government officials who want to kill the monster. Dr. Yamane's daughter, Emiko, learns that her fiancé, Serizawa, has created a weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer that can kill Godzilla. Emiko and her secret boyfriend, Ogata, convince Serizawa to unleash his weapon and kill Godzilla. Serizawa sacrifices himself at the same time, taking both the creature and the secret of his terrible weapon to the grave.
So I know that this movie was a hit because this franchise is still going strong today in the 2020s. But how much money did it make when it was first released, James?
Yeah, it was released in October and early November 1954 in Japan, and the budget was under $1 million. I've read $900,000, and the box office was $2.25 million just from that. So, it was a huge hit.
All right, so the themes of this movie are pretty apparent in terms of this is a movie about a country that is fearful of atomic bombs, radioactivity. Obviously, that makes sense. This movie was made in 1954, less than a decade after America bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That comes through loud and clear in the movie. One thing that I didn't realize was that the opening scene with the people on the fishing boat, that was inspired by another real-life incident, the Castle Bravo test, which happened in 1954, just a few months before they started making this movie. It is a really, really messed up story where America was doing testing on hydrogen bombs in the Bikini Atoll. I don't know exactly how you pronounce that word, but in the Pacific near Japan. And they had warned people to be outside of this blast radius. This boat, Lucky Dragon 5, was outside of the blast radius. They were following the instructions given by the American authorities, and the blast was so much bigger than it was supposed to be. The people on the boat died. The fish were contaminated with radioactivity. There was panic in Japan because they didn't know, is it safe to eat fish now? So the opening scene of Godzilla with this fishing boat being nuked effectively, that was really topical, even more than just Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
There's a woman on the tram or train midway, maybe a little past midway through the movie, and she's a young woman. So it's kind of striking. She's not reminiscing from 60 years ago. She says, "I barely escaped the atomic bomb in Nagasaki, and now this." And she says it without a lot of bitterness. It's almost matter of fact. It's serious, but it's not anything like super heavy woe is me. She's just sort of like another day, another problem. And it's the same woman who's later on what I call the party boat, and she sees, another explosion in the water. That's kind of where your audience is at. And there's some times where it's a subtle theme, like when they're testing the kids for radiation, and that's extremely poignant and so sad. And they're holding the Geiger counter up to the kids after the Godzilla attack. Then there's other times where they just hit the nail on the head, and it's like Serizawa has this oxygen destroyer, which is a made up weapon, but they're talking about that being the next thing. The atomic bomb was one thing. Now we're testing the hydrogen bomb. And now we're talking about this next, what's the next thing? And because, there's just going to be something after that. And when they talk about that weapon, it's very direct. There's no escaping the theme of what we're telling the audience. But at the same time, that didn't bother me. Normally, something like that that's so direct and so blunt, I'd be like, oh man, come on, a little subtlety, show, don't tell, that kind of stuff. But I thought about that for about 2 seconds, and I'm like, I don't think there's anybody in the movie theater in Tokyo in 1954, 70 minutes into the movie, saying to themselves, oh, I get it. This is about that thing that happened here. They know.
A lot of this movie, I think, is about processing the trauma of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and this continued H-bomb testing and this constant fear of what will happen next. And it's hard to imagine what it must have been like living in Japan in the 40s and the 50s and living with that fear. But I do think that the movie does a good job of showing that with those scenes you mentioned, Clint. There's also a moment where a mom is huddling with her kids and she says, "We'll see dad soon." I mean, that is so profoundly horrifying.
Yeah.
But you get it. I feel like this movie conveys a lot of emotion with very little dialogue. And to your point about the movie being pretty on the nose with some of these themes, there are a lot of scenes of government debates, kind of what should we do, and people in a room yelling back and forth at each other.
Keep it secret, let it go in public.
Exactly. And I could imagine myself having a reaction of, come on, this is a Godzilla movie. We want to see more smashy. But that's not really what this movie is about. This movie really is about the human reaction to this monster, to this fear, to this calamity that is going to befall this nation. And I mean, it's a lot. You do need to see that, in part because the special effects weren't all that great. I mean, they were groundbreaking at the time.
The helicopter.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into some of these effects. The helicopter, the train, there were definitely a lot of moments in this movie where it just looked like toys being knocked over.
Yep.
And the reason it looked like that is because that's what it was.
Right.
That's fair. But may I ask the two of you, what is your first introduction to Godzilla movies? Anything about Godzilla movies and the way Godzilla movies are made?
Oh, you're talking about Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Exactly. I'm exactly talking about that. And remind folks what's going on in that scene.
When Pee-wee is escaping with his bike through the movie lot, he goes through a scene where they're making a Godzilla movie, and it's a guy in a suit and planes on strings and little miniatures that the guy is stomping on.
Right. And, ingrained in my head as a kid is that Godzilla, not necessarily bad, but it's this kind of B-level kind of film. And I think everyone kind of thought this way because the Roland Emmerich 1998 thing was like, this is not a B film. This is going to be using the CGI that Spielberg used to make Jurassic Park. So I always knew that Godzilla was supposed to be low tech. I didn't know they were going to use miniatures and do these really close-up perspective shots of a toy helicopter, getting pushed over.
I will say about the special effects, yeah, they did look cheesy at times. You had like little toy army trucks and stuff, and you definitely saw the strings on the airplanes, but they put in the work as far as knocking it down. Like they didn't go cheap on the commitment to spending time during that segment of the film.
Right.
Like the commitment to say, like, we're not just going to give you like 30 seconds of destruction and then we're tired of making these fake buildings. Like, no, we're going to build a lot. We're going to light them on fire. We're going to knock them down. Yeah, they gave you a good portion of the movie towards the destruction element. But even when they were doing that, I was just amazed because it was on theme. Like, he would use his breath on the electricity and it would melt the towers. And it was, to me, it's just almost like saying, like, yeah, come on, electricity, that's the energy of the past. This is radiation. This is radioactive energy. They kept it on theme. That to me was very engaging.
When Godzilla uses his radioactive breath on the electric towers, they freeze and then fall over. At first, I thought it was freeze breath,
you like might be right.
Superman has. No, I don't think it is. I think it is supposed to be just the radioactive breath. It's just the fact that it's in black and white that it's hard to really gauge. If it was red as opposed to blue, that's really all you would need. But at first I was a little confused. I was like, does he have freezing breath and fire breath? But I think it's just hot.
It looks like it freezes up and then it melts over. So I'm like, what was that exactly? And then sort of later, as he's stomping through the town, he's lighting stuff on fire. So
yeah,
I said, I guess that was fire breath. But even still, we know Godzilla is a creature of radiation. And he is something we've unleashed on the world. I mean, that's pretty direct symbolism.
Yeah.
But at the same time, radiation has existed forever. The sun is nothing but radiation.
True.
And we've just unleashed this monster. And Tokyo there's no other choice because the actual history of the bombings was Nagasaki, Hiroshima. And the next question was, okay, is Tokyo going to get bombed? Well, this is answering that question. Like, well, what if there had been the same level of destruction where we have even more people? Like, this could still happen right here.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to what you were saying, Clint, about how electricity is obviously not going to destroy Godzilla. Right. I mean, it's almost laughable that they would think that. And Dr. Yamane basically says that when they're trying the depth charges and the electric fence and they're shooting machine guns at it. This thing survived a hydrogen bomb, maybe even was made stronger by a hydrogen bomb. That's the most powerful weapon on the planet. What are we going to do? Like, nothing is going to stop this thing. And I did a little bit feel like the debate about should we kill it or should we study it, to me, there was an obvious answer to that question, which is you kill it and then you study it.
Yeah, I agree.
I just wanted somebody to say that. Still, you have the obvious question of, yeah, but how do you kill it? But when Dr. Yamane is like, oh, no, we need to study it. I'm sorry, how, though, if it's alive? How are you getting a blood sample from this guy?
It is possible. I am currently, if you can't see, wearing a shirt that has Godzilla fighting King Kong, and it's for the movie Kong versus Godzilla, The New Empire. If you gave blood in March of 2024, you got this promotional t-shirts. And on the front, they're both wearing the red armbands like they just gave blood. So there's somewhere out there's a sample of Godzilla's blood. We can study it.
That is amazing. I love that shirt.
You know, I've had some good t-shirts in my day, but I probably get the most compliments about this one. I'm with you, Al. I think it was like a little bit much to say, oh, well, I'm the paleontologist. I'm the peaceful scientific one. We must study everything. I'm like, how?
Yeah.
Come on. But he did say we need to learn how this creature is resistant, how it survived hydrogen bomb testing, and where this resistance comes from because it didn't kill him. I would say the reason he would want to do that is because we're testing the hydrogen bomb. If we're going to have this weapon in our civilization, there may be a cure for it. Godzilla may unlock the cure for a hydrogen bomb, and then we're going in the right direction. And Serizawa is the other scientist who's like, I regrettably came up with the next new horrible weapon, and I just don't want this unleashed on the world. Maybe I'm slightly shifting topics here, but if you add all of that up and you look at the tone of the movie and then just you know, it's one movie. It's not going to reflect all of Japanese culture, obviously, but there is, to me, a consistent message of not blaming America, which is amazing. I think they said, if we continue to test the hydrogen bomb, then at the very last line, if nuclear testing continues, then someday somewhere in the world, another Godzilla may appear. That's the closest they get to an international statement. The rest of the time, we're blaming ourselves for our testing of the Japanese testing of the hydrogen bomb. That's what released Godzilla, like that attitude of we did this to ourselves. It's an amazing approach 9 years after the Americans dropped the bombs.
I believe that they just say it was H-bomb testing. I don't think they say our H-bomb testing or America's H-bomb testing. I believe it's just testing of the hydrogen bomb, which was America. And I think that the Japanese audiences understood that because of that incident at Bikini Atoll that had just happened. I don't think Japan had hydrogen bombs in 54.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I'm sorry to nitpick, because I do think that it is worth pointing out, and you are right, that they don't say explicitly, this is America's fault. I think it is pretty clear that that is what they're saying without saying it. But I do also think that along the lines of, I don't want to use the word blame, maybe responsibility is a better word.
Yeah.
I think you could look at it that Godzilla is Japan in a way, because Godzilla is a result of the hydrogen bomb. The hydrogen bomb being dropped on Japan was a result of Japan's aggression towards the United States. And I don't want to get into a whole thing about, right or wrong or justified or not justified. That's a whole separate conversation that I do not feel qualified to have. But I feel like there was some analysis I read or something that kind of was a belief in Japan that they were somewhat responsible for this thing that happened to them. And if you look at Godzilla that way, where Godzilla is this vessel of destruction, but he's also a victim. It's both, right? Like Godzilla is not malevolence. Godzilla is not destroying because it wants to destroy. It's destroying because it was driven from its cave by this H-bomb testing and it doesn't know what else to do. So Japanese audiences felt empathy for Godzilla. They were sad that Godzilla had to be killed because he's not just a vicious monster.
His death at the end, like, they go into his natural environment, and there's this peacefulness of Godzilla resting in the natural environment, and they just go down to him and they do the oxygen destroyer and he just fizzles out. He screams. He has one sort of like, death cry at the end.
Yeah.
So to correct the mistake, we have to go to the next level. And I'm sure you're right now that I think about it, because in 1954, I don't think the Japanese would have been allowed by the results of World War II to be testing an H-bomb. I guess probably I might have came up with that thought because it was like in Tokyo Bay.
Okay. That's
fair. I'm just going to say I was impressed with the lack of focusing on blame. It was a focus on responsibility.
Yes.
That kept me so engaged as far as like that particular theme.
Absolutely.
You're certainly right. The atomic the bombs dropped on Japan are certainly in people's mind. But I think also just this fear of we are just going to destroy the world if Nagasaki and Hiroshima, because those weren't even H bombs. Those were just regular uranium-238 fission bombs. But the bombs that would come in the 50s and 60s were just catastrophic.
They're definitely hitting as close to home as possible.
Exactly.
To the point where they were naming neighborhoods in Tokyo. And I can't recall, but they're in this district. Now Godzilla's moved to this district.
Right. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the movie's love triangle. I have to be honest, I was confused. I did not fully get the dynamic of this love triangle and that Amiko was engaged to Serizawa but secretly dating Ogata. I felt like it was presented clumsily, or was that just me? Did you get that right out of the gate, Clint?
So that love triangle, which is, I think the purpose of that is to give us some breathing room and to show, on the human level what's going on and how these lives are affecting this whole, the whole world, really. I've watched this movie twice now. So the first time I was like, what's going on? But Emiko was engaged from like a young age. I don't know. It's 1954. It's another country. I don't know the social structure here, but she was engaged from a young age to Dr. Serizawa. Respects him, has great admiration for him, doesn't love him. She loves Ogata. So, as she gets older, she's going with Ogata and she has to break it to Serizawa. Now, that love triangle has a great impact on what's going to happen next. Is Serizawa a little bit pushed over the edge by losing her? And he's ready to go underwater and kill himself or all that stuff? Or is it more like, well, only Emiko can get through to him? Only Emiko can convince him, like, you have to, now's the time, because Ogata is not going to be able to do it.
Right.
The other guy is not going to be able to say, you have to unleash your weapon of mass destruction. They actually use that term, weapon of mass destruction.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. You're not going to get Ogata to convince Serizawa to do this. They're going to actually wind up in a fist fight in seconds. Serizawa wins, just, giving the man some credit, just, if you're wondering.
He has an eye patch. He's tough.
Yeah. He's a veteran. He's in World War II. So that's how he lost his eye. They did say that.
Right.
He's not going to get to where he needs to be with the acceptance that what he has to do without Emiko. And then he goes one step further and says, all right, I'm literally going to burn my plans, but it's still in my head. Terminator 2 ending. And that's how that love story, I think, interacts with the greater story. Made a little more sense the second time, but one of the things that I appreciated about it was the way it gave us some breathing room between the attacks on Godzilla.
100%. Everything you said is right. It felt clumsy because there's really no romantic tension. There's no chemistry between Emiko and Ogata. I don't really see why Emiko was betrothed to Serizawa. Serizawa worked with Amiko's dad, so that seems a little creepy, but kind of to your point, maybe that's just how it worked culturally. Like, I wasn't rooting for Emiko and Ogata because they're clearly in love. They're the best couple ever. They're so adorable. Like, she wants to be with him. All right. She doesn't want to hurt Serizawa's feelings. That's nice, I guess. It just kind of felt like in a movie where there was so much emotional weight with the life or death consequences, I felt like the love story really didn't pack any emotional punch.
I agree.
Did you guys catch how old Godzilla was?
I caught when Dr. Yamane says that the Jurassic period was 2 million years ago. I was like, that's not right.
No, it's not. I heard that. I was like, okay, what? No, the asteroid hit 65 million years ago. That was the end of the Cretaceous period. The Jurassic period preceded that. So we're looking at 100 million years ago or so. However, I looked it up, and apparently at that time, there were different schools of thought.
Oh.
They weren't really sure how old the Earth was. They weren't sure how old a lot of stuff was.
Oh.
They didn't have the science, I guess the carbon dating or whatever. They didn't quite have the technology yet to figure out how old the Earth had been around, the Big Bang, whatever. When you think about it, what is carbon dating? It's radioactive science, right? So
right.
Go to the internet for a better explanation of that. But they were still settling that debate. So I guess in this movie, they went with the 2 million year old version, and that's totally incorrect. In this movie, they said in the translated English, we can estimate Godzilla stands approximately 165 feet tall. Make a note of that. We'll get to that later.
I noted that as well, that the size of Godzilla is going to change. Right.
That's right on the nose, almost exactly 50 meters. So I'm guessing they said in Japanese 50 meters, and we translated it to 165 feet. But we'll get a different number later.
And speaking of when we'll get that, why don't we talk about the next film in our podcast, 1956's Godzilla, King of the Monsters, !
Wrong.
What? How did I get it wrong, Al?
James, you Jamesed it.
Oh, no. How did I get it wrong?
It's Godzilla, King of the Monsters, ! They retroactively made it a colon on IMDb, but it was a comma.
Okay, you jerk.
I looked this shit up, man. I care about this punctuation. No one else does, but I do. But okay, so for anyone unfamiliar with that movie, it's basically the same thing we've been talking about. It's a retelling of the 1954 Godzilla movie, except this time it's told from the point of view of an American journalist named Steve Martin, which is funny and weird because it's not Steve Martin, the actor. the guy from Only Murders in the Building and 8 million classic comedies. It's just a guy named Steve Martin, played by Raymond Burr, and his scenes were filmed after the fact and edited into the 1954 film to make it seem like Steve Martin was there the whole time, observing everything that was happening, explaining what's happening, and talking to the back of other people's heads. So this movie was the one that was released in the States, right, James? Because the 54 version did not release in the States for a long time.
Correct. Yeah, it was from the research I found, it was felt that at the time, foreign films were just not marketable in the United States. So I found anywhere from $100,000, more than that, a few $100,000 to film, because obviously they didn't have to film the entire movie. It was released on April 4th, 1956. And similar to Godzilla in Japan, this film made $2 million. And this was actually the first Japanese film to become a commercial success in the United States. And this really opened the door for Japanese films.
Right. Okay, so this is episode 483 of the podcast, because we've done a couple of episodes over the years where we did double movies in one episode. I believe this is the 490th or so movie that we've talked about. I genuinely think this might be the most unintentionally hilarious movie I've ever watched for the podcast, because seeing Steve Martin react to everything that's happening and repeatedly say, "Hey, my Japanese not so good. What did he say? What's going on?" He's just asking people to explain things to him and looking concerned. When I was watching it, I was thinking Raymond Burr got a nice paycheck for, I was guessing, a couple of days worth of work. I saw things online where he said it was 1 day's worth of work, and then other people said, no, it actually was a whole week's worth of work. But it can't have been that long, because most of it, he's just standing in front of a white wall smoking.
The only people I think that had to do any work on this were probably set designers.
Yeah.
Like having to recreate the office room where the phone calls are coming in the beginning, where the locals are demanding explanations, or, just like going out in the hills in California to shoot a few of the scenes that are supposed to be on Odo Island, where Steve Martin just stands behind everybody, and just says, smokes his pipe, and like,
During the monsoon, he's smoking his pipe.
You're right, Al. Not knowing it was a remake, it was kind of hilarious when I started watching it. For me, the narration kind of worked in a weird way.
Did anybody watch this movie first?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so I watched the first, the original Japanese version first. So you're comparing the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So from an economic standpoint, I can understand why a studio can take a surefire hit that's already been filmed. All you got to do is the licensing. All the hard work's basically been done. You throw actually a Canadian actor in there, Raymond Burr, does a fine job with his expectations, and you can't really blame him for doing it, but it doesn't feel right. And he's bringing the American perspective very obviously. He's an American reporter.
Yeah.
As much as that's not very exciting to have an American say, well, you need to hear this from an American. Like, all right. Yeah. It's like, I didn't like that. But if you are going to look at him as a character, he's a reporter. He narrates and he reports. He stays in his lane. So I did appreciate the fact that they didn't give him too much agency. I was like holding my breath. I'm like, please don't edit him into that final scene where he's in a scuba suit. Do not put him underwater. Like, no, he's at most he's on the boat. Don't have him being like the one who kills Godzilla. And they did not. They kept that part intact. But they retold the story. It's not just reframing it. They retold the story. They took out a lot of the obvious quotes and obvious stuff about the atomic bomb. Clearly, we're talking about radiation. But they didn't go into so much of the debate over the H-bomb. They took out a lot of the key comments. The young woman who was on the party boat, who was also on the train in the original version, who says, I barely escaped Nagasaki, now this. She doesn't have any dialogue in the second movie. We're not going there.
Right.
So that to me was like, all right, I think we're losing everything that I found so compelling with the first movie, and we're making another monster movie. We're making the giant crab that attacks St. Louis, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's where I was by the end. They didn't destroy the story, but they sucked it dry.
Yeah, it's very, very deliberate about the bigger themes that have been stripped away and replaced by Steve Martin talking to people who are very clearly not the actor who played Ogata and Serizawa and Amiko, and it's just someone with a haircut that is, taking up 1/3 of the frame. I said it was unintentionally hilarious, and it is, but it is also insulting.
Yeah.
And you can look at it in the way of this was the way to do it. These producers wanted to bring the Godzilla movie to America, and they couldn't just import it. It was a different world back then. There was still a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment in the United States then. And so to just bring over a foreign film, yeah, it wasn't going to work. And, look, this movie was successful in the States. People did see it. Clint, you asked if James and I had seen it first. No, we hadn't. But for a lot of people,
right,
yeah, they grew up watching this version of Godzilla. Steven Spielberg talks about how Godzilla really influenced his making of Jurassic Park. And you can definitely see that in, the obvious ways of a dinosaur creature that smashes things, and also the bigger themes of we have created this thing. Should we create this thing? This thing is running amok. What hath we wrought on ourselves kind of themes. But he watched this version because when he was a kid, he wasn't watching the original 1954 Godzilla. And I kind of like to imagine little kid Steven Spielberg who's learning about film and learning about stories and characters and thinking, well, what's the point of this Steve Martin guy? Because, he's not making movies with a character who just stands around and smokes and asks people what's happening.
Right.
Like, even as a kid, Spielberg had to realize this is a dumb character.
Yeah.
I assume.
What does he do other than play the role of the framing technique? He's not a character.
No. When he's quote unquote on the phone with Dr. Serizawa and he's like, oh, I'll meet you for dinner. Immediately I'm like, no, you won't. That's not going to happen. And of course it doesn't. And then when he's talking with Amiko and Ogata and he says, I'll go with you to talk to Dr. Serizawa. And they're like, no, you don't have to. Because of course he can't. One thing about that scene, the movie, it does the in medias res thing. It starts in the middle and you see Amiko talking to Steve Martin after the attack on Tokyo. But then later in the movie, after the attack on Tokyo, when Amiko goes up to Steve Martin and checks in on him, it's not the same scene from the beginning. It's a totally different scene. Steve has completely different bandages. Amiko is there with Ogata that time. Like, what the hell is that?
That's a good point. I don't think I quite noticed that. She has to wake him up later in the movie. Yeah.
It's supposed to be the same thing, but it's not just like, oh, she's standing in a slightly different position. It's just a totally different scene. While they're making these changes, they could have fixed that, I guess.
I picture some Hollywood executive smoking a cigar saying, they'll never notice. Don't worry about it. The way, like you said early in the beginning, Steve Martin says, everything has to be translated for him. I'm sorry, can you tell me what he said? I didn't understand that. And then he literally says, I'm afraid my Japanese is a little rusty. Yeah. And then they completely abandon that. And then we have inside view on Japanese characters speaking only to each other without Steve Martin present. And they're all speaking in English. They just completely abandoned that about 20 minutes in. It's only about an hour and 20-minute movie. And the rest of the time, all the Japanese characters are speaking in English to each other, to Steve. There's no translating anymore. We're just done with that. They'll never notice. They'll never notice.
Right. And the dubbing is so bad. But yeah, I guess they just figured no one's going to care.
I guess not. Part of me thought maybe this is kind of marketed for kids. Like you said, I got to stop short of judging, as weird as it is to watch today, because this is how they brought Godzilla to America at the time. And they must have at least known that this is how we had to do it. Maybe they were trying to get it to just everybody, including youngsters.
Yeah.
I had some bigger problems, some other things, like how obviously important Steve is. So first of all, I was coming to from Cairo to Cairo, and I stopped off in Japan for a social call. Can I have that job?
Yeah, Steve Martin's got a good gig.
Yeah, not bad, right? He's like, I'm just going to stay here. This is a big story. I'm going to report on it. And so then, how important is this guy? He gets stopped because he was in this flight and they were interviewing all the passengers that were overhead the boat that, was from the first movie. That's kind of interesting that they're going to introduce, they're going to make that tie-in. But then he gets pulled over by, the Japanese police officer, custom guards, whatever he is. Steve Martin says, well, whatever's being done about it, I'd like to find out about it. And then the Japanese police officer says to the American reporter, all right, come with me.
Right.
Like, he's a really important guy.
Apparently. You mentioned how in the 54 movie that they say that Godzilla is 165 feet, and in the 1956 version, they change that to 400 feet tall.
Yeah.
They also do change the voltage on the electric towers. In the 54 version, it's 50,000 volts. In the 1956 version, it's 300,000 volts. So a lot more. They actually did make one change that I did appreciate. In the 56 version, they say that those electric towers were already there. And so they're just generating electricity through them to stop Godzilla. In the 54 version, they say that they build all of these towers as a perimeter defense to stop Godzilla. And it's like, wow, those things go up really fast.
Yeah.
That had to be quite the construction job that they just do in between scenes. So that was like the only change that I thought was a worthwhile edit.
One of the big differences in this movie versus the last one, they really just sort of blame Godzilla. He's the monster, we got to kill him. That's pretty much it. They keep it simple. Yeah. They start off, like you said, in Medias Res, they start off with the scenes of destruction. And right from the beginning, like early shots, they're holding the Geiger counter up to the kids. That sucked that scene dry. By doing that, it shows the destruction, but what it does is it eliminates kind of the element of discovery of why Godzilla has come out of the water, discovering that he's leaving literally a radioactive footprint like we have in the first movie. We just go straight into like, oh, it's radioactivity, and that's it, before we can kind of really get our bearings, get attached to the characters and figure things out. That to me was like an urgency, I think, for the American film to get and keep your attention, but not a long-term plan of sustaining it with the deeper thoughts and the deeper feelings. So that I thought was the biggest difference between the movies. That general idea of sucking out the really core theme of what this is about.
Absolutely. So with that said, Clint, do you think that 1954's Godzilla and 1956's Godzilla King of the Monsters stand the test of time? I guess start with the original first.
The original first, yes. My vote is yes. Are the special effects up to modern standards? No. But when you have the subject matter that they covered and the way they covered it and the way they show the human struggle with humanity and represented through Godzilla, that's something that I think is classic and timeless. And the way they approached that was just so amazing to me. It's almost like no other movie I've ever seen, where you have these cultural burdens, these cultural, responsibilities. What is our responsibility? We've already said it all, but to me, that's it. That's what Godzilla 1954 does. And that's, to me, what makes it a classic. We can kind of laugh about the airplanes on the strings, but a movie is more than that. And then Godzilla delivered so well in that category. But because of that, the original 1954 stands the test of time.
And what about the 1956 Americanized version?
Different answer. No, Godzilla 1956 does not stand the test of time. I think it ages very poorly. The way they have an American guy in there, just, we need you to tell us the story and everything like that. They sucked everything dry about all the, social responsibilities and things like that. Again, I stopped short of judging in 1956 because this has spawned 2 tracks of Godzilla movies. And Japan is still making socially conscious Godzilla movies. One of the more recent ones was about how the government lied to the kamikaze pilots and wasn't telling them the full truth. That's the events of Godzilla before this. And we still have the American versions where Godzilla just, marches through San Francisco or wherever the heck and just smashes buildings. So
Right.
we've created two things, and you don't have that without 1956. That's okay. We can have monster smashing stuff. Does that movie 1956 stand the test of time? In every way, no.
Okay. James, what do you think? Start with the 54 version.
I have to say 1954's Godzilla, it was a really cool film. I didn't mind the special effects at all. I'm perfectly fine putting myself in that mindset. And I'm going to say when talking about 1956's King of the Monsters, I have to say this is one of the worst double features I've ever seen. Watching King of the Monsters after Godzilla, it's so boring. But that's not the fault of 1956's King of the Monsters. The first film is it's an emotional film, and you see a lot of Dr. Serizawa's internal struggle and the destruction you see, and the fear and atomic energy is talked about, not necessarily American, but just atomic testing. I think that Godzilla King of the Monsters, it's a monster film. And I think that both of them stand the test of time. I think that they're both completely different films. But if you're really looking for a monster film with a lot of weird exposition, you're right, Al. It's kind of hilarious when you watch it right after 54 Godzilla. But I kind of think it might work if you've never seen it. And I kind of like the second film too. Once I kind of got into it, I was just watching the first film again. But it wasn't a bad film, and I think it was just a monster film. It didn't really have any of the emotional impact. I wouldn't call it a soulless remake, but you're not really going to have the thematic themes that are underlying in there. Thematic themes. So that's my verdict. I actually think both stand the test of time. I enjoyed both. The first film is vastly superior, and if you have the chance, watch the first film. I think even if you only watch 1956, you're missing out. It stands the test of time. I kind of was entertained by it. But what do you think, Al? Do the two Godzillas stand the test of time?
First, before I answer that question, say the word again, James, when something is very, very funny. It starts with an H.
Hilarious.
Yeah, you say that weird. Maybe that's why you like Steve Martin in the 1956 version, because he says a lot of words weird too. He refers to the helicopter as a helicopter.
Oh, I have that written down. That's in my notes.
Oh, see? Okay, right. That was weird. And then it's the same helicopter toy thing that gets knocked down. And then when Godzilla attacks the party boat, he says there was hope and celebration, but that hope and celebration was short-lived.
Lived, yeah.
Not lived. So maybe that's why you like the 1956 version, James, because Steve Martin talks like you. Ha ha ha! Zing. But I 100% agree with you, Clint. The 1954 movie Godzilla is amazing because it has depth, it has emotion, it is talking about real world stuff, and it's using a dinosaur creature to do it, which is good storytelling. That's genre storytelling.
It's a monster. We've unleashed a monster.
Exactly. It's metaphor, but there's also some pretty literal stuff in there. It's 10-year-old history. It's really recent history for Japan, and it's emotional. Like, it is a really, really sad movie in a lot of ways. I think we can sort of be desensitized to violence in movies where you see buildings get knocked over and people screaming, and it's just par for the course in your average superhero movie, action movie. You don't even think about it anymore. And in 1954's Godzilla, they make you think about it. They make you think about what's happening to these people. It bothered me a little bit because there was a line about that they were going to evacuate Tokyo, and it doesn't really seem like they do. It seems like there's a lot of innocent people still within the perimeter. I feel like a line of dialogue about how Godzilla went farther than we imagined and now he's in civilian territory, or the evacuation didn't happen as planned, or something, because they do specifically say that it's like emergency personnel only. And you see a lot of civilians in there too. So whatever, that's a nitpick. You can nitpick the 54 version. The special effects look silly. The love story is hard to get behind and get invested in. But I do think that movie stands the test of time. The 1956 American version, definitely not. It looks awful. In a way, sure, it's unfair to look at it from a 2025 perspective. Also, that's what we do here. And so, yeah, it feels really tacky, horrifically insensitive to just say, hey, this movie about Japan and Japanese fears and Japanese trauma and Japanese characters, we know what it needs. A white guy telling you what to think, telling you what's happening, telling you how to feel at every step of the way. No, that does not stand the test of time. That is really, really insulting. How many years ago was it that Parasite won Best Picture? That was a Korean movie, all in Korean. I don't think there was any English in it. And it won the American Academy Awards Best Picture because it was a great movie and people can read subtitles. Maybe some people didn't agree with that win, but whatever. We as a society have evolved where, yeah, they're just subtitles, man. You read them or don't, whatever. But we're not just going to re-edit the movie and put a white guy in it to explain everything. So I very much think that the 1956 movie does not stand the test of time. And I'm kind of surprised that you said yes, James. I thought we were going to go 3 for 3 on yeses and 3 for 3 on nos.
It's a worse remake, but it's passable and it's way inferior. It barely passes, but it was fine.
I think even fine is a stretch, but to each their own. But Clint, I want to thank you again for coming back on the show, for picking these two movies. This was so much fun.
Thank you very much. I have so much fun doing this, and thank you guys for doing this. This 2-movie deal. I feel like I had to earn it. Like we had to do a few movies first. But yeah, this is my 4th time, and I've loved every single one of them. But thank you guys for agreeing to do this double movie. I saw this and I thought, yeah, this would be really interesting to talk about these 2 movies together. They're not really separate movies. They're not the same, but they're not enough different to be considered 2 different movies.
Definitely not. And so when you come back next time, you will be entering a very exclusive club. Do you have a movie in mind for your next appearance?
No, I don't have anything specific in mind, but if I get an idea, I'm going to do what I always do, where I'm going to email and I'm going to say, Al, I want to do this movie. Save it for me for however long it takes, please. So thank you for saving this one for me, because to me, this is like the type of movie that I think is perfect to talk about for the test of time. I just don't know what we'll talk about next, but I know I'll want to be back, and I look forward to getting my 5-timers jacket.
There you go. Well, think about it. No rush, no pressure. Can't wait to have you back on for a 5th time. It's always so much fun having you on the show. That's going to do it for us this week. Come back next week when we talk about All About Eve. This is a movie that's celebrating its 75th anniversary. I've never seen it. I've heard of it. We did 2 movies from the 50s this week. Let's do a movie from 1950 next week. Why not? In the meantime, we want to hear from you. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. You can find all our old episodes, including the other episodes with Clinton Festa, joining us on testoftimepod.com. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.